recording.
Yay. Hi, everyone. My name is Sam, and we're going to talk about reliquary bags tonight. This is the first part of a two-part class, and a little history on reliquary bags. If you Google reliquary, you will get amazing images. Reliquaries inherently are very ornate and fancy containers for something that was religiously important to the person. So several different religions would make what they call pilgrimages. Most of us think about Catholic relics, but there's other religions that have relics. And so a relic or a reliquary could be something as ornate as some of them were beautiful arms made out of hammered silver covered in jewels. Pardon me. I would show you pictures, but every time I seem to move to my other camera, my internet quits working. So we're going to not do that a whole lot. For this class, we're going to talk about a bag that you would keep on your own. So the more bling, the better. It doesn't have to be something for religious purposes. It could be something to keep something that's special to you, or just because you think it's pretty and you want to put your chapstick in it. Any of those things work. I'm going to talk about 3 different approaches to reliquary bags. And the first one was felt reliquary bags, and I'll show you a picture. And felt applique. Now, applique is very historically documented. There's a lot of different uses for it. And you can see on this piece, I used a piece of felt in a long piece. And then I used 2 different pieces of a cutout. And to be real honest, I Googled, I think I Googled Mediterranean designs, and I got pictures of tiles, and I basically took a screenshot of the picture of the tile and turned it into cutouts. And that's how I made that particular cutout. I have another one that I really, really like. That's a cute little birdie. And all of these, don't mean to make you car sick. All of these patterns are in the handouts if you want to look at them. I did another one.
The handouts have been put in the chat if anybody wants to download them.
Oh, beautiful. I did another felt one with different cutouts. Now this one, I cut funny, and I put the design on the wrong side because I wanted the front to be plain where I folded over. So you can see, or maybe you can't see, that I stitched it across the top because I cut it and moved the fold over top. Now with the felt ones, I put everything on with a blanket stitch. I think blanket stitches are very pretty. They're very easy. And because it's felt, the edges aren't going to fray. So the blanket stitch holds everything in place quite nicely. You can see here's my little bird guy, and his wing is on. Now the other thing is, these are the less fancy, the less blingiest of all of the reliquary bags I made. In the handout, I don't have it with me because I actually gifted it to somebody who really liked it. I even decorated one with a big wide strip of inkle weaving down here, but you could use any type of trim if you wanted. Any of that would be pretty. The part that I liked about this part was just the freedom that you would have in how you're going to embellish it. Now, reliquary bags were always embellished because that was the whole point of them, was to be fancy and blingy, to hold something that was precious or special to you. So for example, you can see on this guy, I have glass pearls, I have glass beads, and just whatever, basically whatever moves your muse. You can use all different kinds. To be real honest, I use it as an excuse to buy way too many beads on Amazon. So, but it's a lot of fun. If you look at this one, I'm trying to move slowly so I don't make you car sick. I lined this one with some really pretty blue Dupioni silk. But I lined another one with some very common linen, very coarse, almost looking linen. You can line it with whatever you want. So when you make the felt reliquary bag, you basically make 2 bags. You make the felt bag, and then you make the lining bag, and you'll put the wrong sides together. And then can you see, maybe if I hold it this way, and then you see I blanket stitched the edges together. So you would turn the underside down of your lining and blanket stitch it to your pouch. And then the thing you want to think about is how you're going to close it. There's one in the handouts that I closed with a piece of inkle weaving and a big pearl button. And that's the one that I gave to my friend because she really liked it. These guys, I chose fancy clasps. Now, to be real honest, I bought almost all of these. In fact, I think I bought all of these particular ones on either eBay or I found them on Amazon. I Googled medieval looking clasps, and this is what I got. I don't think I spent more than $5 for any of these. So it's not like, now believe me, there were ones out there that were way prettier and way more expensive, but you could use anything that you wanted. I even found some beautiful copper kilt pins, and that would work as well to close those bags. So that's the beginning of talking about the felt bags. Does anybody have questions for me up to this point? This is the hardest part of a Zoom class. I teach nurses, and so I'm used to that constant interaction, and so this is kind of weird. Everybody okay? Perfect.
All is well.
Was that a question?
No, ma'am, everything's fine.
Oh, good. The next one I want to talk about is the embellished brocade bags. That was hard to say. So to be real honest, these 3 pieces are made out of a remnant that I found in the markdown bin at a fabric store. Now you can buy brocade pieces on purpose online, and there's some examples of that in the handouts as well. And what I liked about this one, and I don't know if you can see it, I'm trying not to make you car sick and move fast, but I chose to put little green beads here. I have some blue beads up here. I have pearly beads, just whatever basically makes you happy. Once again, remember, the point of this is to be blingy. The blingier, the better, the fancier, the better, because that was what these reliquary bags did. They were to hold a precious item, and so it was put in a precious container, if you will. Now, the thing with this particular bag is it's lined with some gold Dupioni silk, and I chose to inkle weave a drawstring. And so it's just a drawstring bag. Now that means when you're done beading your brocade pieces, then you're going to put it together. Once again, you end up making 2 bags. One's the outside bag and one's the lining. And at the edges here, and if you have questions, I'll gladly answer that. When you sew it together, you just leave enough place to put your safety pin through, if you will, that you're going to use to thread your drawstring through. Now, I have several different ideas of this. This one has the same design on both sides. And I made this one with the colors of a recreation group that I really like, that I play with. Hi, Theory. This one I made as a pouch, and I inkle wove the strings. However, who is it? Michelle that did the finger loop braid? That would work perfectly as well. And the way you choose to finish it is whatever makes you happy. So if you look at this guy, I don't know if you can see it very well. Can you see him okay? That help? It's an aglet. There's several sources for aglets out there. I haven't looked at the fabric stores to see if you can find them, and they just make a finished end really pretty. But in the final class, I will have finished my one of my other drawstring bags. That one, I have some pretty pewter buttons and some big wooden beads, and I'm going to use that to finish my drawstring. So this is a drawstring bag once again. It's lined with some brown linen, and I thought it needed some weight, so I found this really pretty button to sew in there. Now this guy is that same pattern that was on that bag. And you can see the pomegranate from Catherine of Aragon. But this one, I don't think I'm going to turn into the pouch. I think I'm going to find some brown Dupioni silk, and that's what I'm going to use for the back. And then I'm probably going to line it with some gold Dupioni silk. Remember, the blingier the better, because that was the point of a reliquary bag, was to show A, your wealth, and B, hold something that was precious to you, even if it's just your chapstick and your eye drops. The thing about these brocade bags is you'll notice that they're very different shapes from the felt bags. The felt bags were all very uniformed. These can be very, very different because you can make them any way you want, and you can decide which part of the brocade you're going to bead or make fancy, and which part you're like, yeah, I don't care. Questions so far about the brocade ones?
Were these bags something that like modern, like just kind of everybody would carry around with them in the time period, and then you'd have like your money purse separately, or were they the same bag?
I'm so glad you asked me that. There are actually, and my French is horrible, so I can't say it in French, but they're basically alms bags, ALMS, alms bags. And you could carry them if you were, say, a man or a lady of status and wealth, you would carry those alms bags. And a lot of the pictures that I've seen in historical paintings and artwork are brocaded and beaded and amazingly fancy. Now, these were people who had wealth, not only for themselves, but then they would share with people who they considered to be less fortunate than themselves. And so they were decorated with threads made of precious metal, so silver thread and gold thread. And they didn't have cute little red glass beads that, like I bought on Amazon. They had rubies. They would have sapphires. They would have diamonds. I do have one of my bags I have decorated with amber bits. And so you could use those semi-precious stones as well. So your alms bag would be different from your reliquary bag, but they're going to look very similar. Did that answer the question?
Yeah. And would you carry both at the same time, or would you have one or the other?
You would only probably wear your alms bag, because if your reliquary bag held your precious relic, it would be with your other treasures. And so it's not something you would necessarily wear on your body unless you were going to a special religious place. So let's pretend that we're Catholic, and we made a reliquary bag, and it's holding our relic of whatever saint we venerate. And so we might want to wear that or carry that when we're going to mass, or if we're going to a holy place, like the saint's birthplace or that sort of thing. For example, in all of this learning, if you are Catholic, please, I'm not trying to be disrespectful. I've learned so much about the different relics and how Catholics view that. Saint Dymphna has become very interesting and special to me. She's the patron saint of people who are mentally ill, as well as people who have Alzheimer's and people who are deaf. She has a church dedicated to her in Missouri, that the reliquary that her relics are in is basically a giant hammered gold altar. It's exquisite. So let's say that you were going to go to that particular chapel because she was a patron saint of yours, then you would, yes, take your reliquary bag that had your relic of that saint with you. Did that help?
Definitely.
Beautiful. I have to put my glasses on because now I'm having trouble seeing because it's the end of the day and I'm old. The next one I want to talk about is the cross-stitch reliquary bag that I did. Now, the reason I'm holding these up is I'm afraid if I move to the camera that I had to show these, that my internet will crash, and that's just been a bummer. Now, this is a cross-stitch of an organization that I play with a historical recreation group. And this is the symbol of the local group that I play with. It's divided into kingdoms and that sort of thing. So this is a symbol of the kingdom that I play with. And I did it in cross stitch. Now, historically, it wasn't called cross stitch. It was called things like over under. And it is everywhere. Mary Queen of Scots did tons of pieces while she was in exile. I found a wonderful new handout, and I will put the name of this book in the notes when I'm done here. Give me a minute. Here we go. Here's the cover page. Now, this book is no longer in print, but you can download it for free from this Bard Graduate Center. It's 350 some odd pages. How do I know that? Someone may or may not have printed a lot of them at work. And it's amazing the things that are in here. So you can take any of these ideas and turn them into a simple cross stitch. Now, with this cross stitch bag, what I did was I mounted it on white dupioni and I lined it with the blue dupioni. The reason the bottom is open is I don't like the way these edges look. And so I'm going to take them apart and I'm going to put something around these edges, and I'll show you that in the last class if you come back to look at it. But other ways you can make this more blingy, I found some really pretty pearl buttons. And so I'm going to put a pearl button in the corners. I'm also going to use some more of those pewter buttons that I talked about with the other one. This is also a drawstring bag. Once again, you could inkle weave or finger weave a piece. This one I used shiny tatting thread. It was very fun. It's very, very glittery. Because remember, again, the idea of these is to be blingy and fancy. Even once again, if all they hold are your sunglasses and your cell phone. Any questions for me up to this point? Perfect. I started talking about the cross stitch part. So depending upon the time frame you're looking at that this reliquary bag would have been made, most likely the over under stitch would have been done on an even weave linen. Now this one is done on modern Aida cloth because I'm not that good at cross stitching yet. Did I buy some linen? Of course I did, because, well, who doesn't buy those things? But I just haven't attempted it yet. There are very, very simple patterns you can find. You can download them from the internet. I have some in the handouts there. In the handout, one of them that I have, oh, one moment. I printed the handout. I'd forgotten that part. For example, if you printed the handouts or you're looking at the handouts, there's this particular pattern. This is actually from the 1400s, and it's the cover of a songbook. But that doesn't mean you couldn't take one of those little squares, turn it into your cross stitch bit that you would put in the middle of the reliquary bag, fancy it up with some black lace or some black fancy stitching. Another way to think of cross stitch is black work. Catherine of Aragon made that very popular when she became Queen of England. But black work's really simple, and it's very lovely, very linear. And the cool thing about the reliquary bag is the back doesn't have to be pretty because you're going to cover it up with a lining. So I have these also in the handout. Sorry, I'm moving too fast. If I am, please tell me. I'm trying to not make people car sick. So let's talk a little bit about how you're going to plan this project. The first thing you want to pick is what kind of a bag do you want to make? Do you want to make just a simple felt bag? Now, granted, they're the less fancy of all of them, but they go together very quickly, and I like them. I like the look of them. I like the look of the applique. And if you're doing them for the historical recreation group, they are within the time period that we play in. So they're very, very, very popular and very easy to use and very easy to make. I made these basically to give away as gifts. They go together quickly. I think a step up from that is the beaded bags. Now, the next thing you have to think about, besides you're going to do cross stitch, you're going to do beaded, or you're going to do felt, is what do you want it to look like? How big do you want it to be? How small do you want it to be? Sometimes, depending upon which kind you're going to pick, like the beaded bags, your size would be determined by the fabric you're using. I don't have it with me, but I'll show it to you at the end class. I have a little piece of blue and cream that I just absolutely love. So I found some creamy white glass pearls that I'm going to use to bead it, but it's going to be very, very small. It wouldn't be very large at all. And it probably wouldn't hold a whole heck of a lot. But once again, if I were using it for the original purpose, it would certainly hold my rosary or my paternoster, that sort of thing. Or if size is no matter, then I can make it as big as I want to and close it any way I want to. The next thing you have to think about, sorry, I'm going through it in my head, would be how do you want to close it? Now remember the felt bags, we had the fold over closure. And I used brooches to pin it shut. Or I think I have a picture. I do. I have a picture, and this is in the handouts. There we go. And see the pearl button? This is hard to do backwards. So first you need to decide what kind of material you want to use. Then you would need to decide how you want to close it, how big you need it to be. And you could also use the drawstrings, and then that opens up a world of how am I going to use drawstrings. There are several things. If you don't want to make anything, there's some stuff at the fabric store that's called rat tail, just like it sounds like, rats and tails. And it's kind of a polyester, and it's a thicker, it's not a really, really thin string like yarn would be. It's going to be thicker than yarn. Comes in a lot of different colors. Be careful buying it online. You need to look at how big it is, because I thought I had bought some amazing rat tail, and it turns out it was 1 millimeter thick, and it doesn't make me happy. So you do want to think about how big it is, because the bigger, like the 4 millimeter rat tail, is just going to make a nicer string for it. And then remember, once you've got that drawstring, how are you going to finish that drawstring? And that's where the aglets come in, or some pretty buttons, that sort of thing, my wooden beads, stuff like that. Any questions for me so far? I feel like I've talked like a rushing wind.
What is an aglet?
I'm so glad you asked that. An aglet is this little end guy. Can you see him? So he's a metal piece. To be real honest, your shoelaces have aglets. They're just made of plastic. So an aglet is a generic term for something that ends the string. Now these aglets mashed on, you could bend the edges. There are some aglets that sew on. In fact, I think I have. I do. I am so glad you asked that question, because here are some beautiful silver aglets that I purchased. Can you see them?
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
So it's a cone shape a little bit?
It's a cone shape, yep. And this guy, I don't know if you can see the little flowery looking leaf things there.
Yeah.
At the top. So I'm going to stitch that onto the end of my string, probably using some silver colored thread. That's the other part of the decoration. And I put this in my notes. When you do the beading, the thread and the needles become really important. So this thread is silver colored thread by Sewology, and it's very, very, very fine. In fact, I don't even think you can you see it at all? Oh, a little bit there. And so this goes through the eye of a beading needle quite nicely. And because it's metallic, it just spices things up. So I'm going to use this silver thread and my beading needle to sew this silver aglet on.
Edie and I both agree that tassels are awesome.
The which?
Tassels.
You know, I was just going to come up with that. In one of my pictures, oh, this guy's got a funny, there we go. I made a tassel out of the silk threads that I was using, and you can tie them on. And if you want to get even fancier, there's these pretty little things called cap beads that you can put on there. They're quite lovely. I recently learned about paternosters, which is another religious item that you may or may not put in a reliquary bag. And they have lovely cap beads on them and tassels on them. The other thing to think about is what kind of thread you want to use for this stitching. And you can see here on this little guy, oh, look at that. Do you see my blanket stitch up there?
Mm-hmm.
So I used some lovely silk thread, and there's so many ways out there and resources out there that where you can find that thread, or you can use plain cotton crochet thread. I would probably not use acrylic thread, but that doesn't mean you couldn't if it's what made you happy. Once again, you're going to go for the color, and remember, the more bling, the better. That's what you want. You're looking for that flash. That was the whole point of these. When I went to get the bag, or excuse me, the beads to decorate these bags, that's another thing to think about. So Theory's on here, and she has to be now sworn to silence because my children don't need to know how many beads I've purchased. But this is just a little teeny tiny selection, and these are little seed beads. Can you see them there? Now, because these are the smaller seed beads, you have to use a beading needle in order to put them on. And beading needles tend to be very long and very skinny. And the thing with beading needles, ladies, is these eyeballs are not quite as sharp as they used to be when they were 21. Okay, so it may or may not take me a minute or two to thread these. You will find that on the internet, there are some beading needles that are advertised with a flexible eye that you can push the eye down, but I didn't like them because the needles themselves were very, very flimsy, and they weren't sturdy enough, in my opinion, to go through fabric nicely. Here's an example of some of the silk thread that I got. But once again, there's so many options out there of different kinds of silk thread. Trying to find my beading needle. I should have thought of that beforehand. I'm sorry. Oh, here we go. So there's some of my beading needles, and you see they're very, very thin. Can you see how thin they are? And that lets them go through the smaller beads. Now my bigger beads, like here's some tiger eye beads, and there's some carnelian beads. A regular needle will go through those okay. And then I have some really, really much larger beads that are not quite pony beads, but they're pretty good size, and a regular needle will go through those as well. I will admit the beads are difficult to gauge in the beginning. So I do suggest, if you're willing to go out, wearing your mask and going to a fabric store, Michael's, Joann's, a bead store, even Walmart, to be really honest. Several of the Walmarts carry a fair amount of craft supplies, and just looking at the different sizes of beads, so that when you go back home and you decide you want to buy things on Amazon or on eBay, you know what the different sizes mean. So you're not going to be surprised and think, oh, those are really small, or oh, those are really big. Now, regular sewing thread tends to be very, very thick, and sometimes it will not go through the eye of your beading needle. So that's one thing to think about. I have discovered once again that the smaller spools of like Sewology thread tend to be thinner. And so they're not necessarily the easiest to use on a sewing machine, but they're going to be very easy to use with your beading needles because they're going to be thinner. Oh, there's my bag of it. For example, this is my treasure bag, and I've got my gold thread, I've got my red thread, but all of them are from these smaller spools of Sewology thread, and they just tend to be thinner. I don't get money from Sewology, so that I'm not really doing a commercial. Now, I did buy some silver metallic thread from a different type of company. And this is from Sulky. And while it's very thin, it's also kind of wide, if that makes sense. See if I can get it to come off the spool so you can see it. And so it does not work for my thinner. Oh, no, you can't see that. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, the camera is just not working, and I'm afraid if I switch to it that my internet will die again. But that is one of the things you need to pay attention to. Now, the reason I got all started in this nonsense was I needed something that was easily portable. In case you can't tell by the scrubs, I do work as a nurse. And so I do end up getting to sit at the screening station for 2-hour stints, which most of our classes start at 7:30 or 8 o'clock. So between 7 and 8:10, you're busy. And after that, you have very little to do. And so I needed a project that was easy. It was small. It all fits into a little Ziploc bag if I want to. The biggest thing I have to tote around is my hoop and my beads. So it's a very portable thing. It's very easy to use. I started with the beading projects doing needle books, and I would work on those when we could still travel. I would work on those in the airport. In fact, it's amazing how many people you meet who are also stitchers when you are working on sewing projects in the airport. I actually ended up establishing a friendship with someone who lives in Henderson, which is near me. She was admiring my needle books. I had just finished it, so I gifted it to her. I'm like, well, here, you can have this. And so we exchanged addresses, and I got a lovely little brick stitch wallet for my effort. So it's incredible how many people have established a relationship with over beads and needles. So once again, it's very portable. It's the kind of thing you can take with you if you go have to sit at the doctor's office or that sort of thing. It's easily put up and put down. When things do open up again and we do get to travel, I carry these adorable little preschooler scissors. They're a very short blade and they are a blunt end, so nobody takes them away from you at TSA. Any questions for me so far? I feel like all I've done is talk. Everybody doing okay? This no feedback is really difficult, let me tell you.
What is a paternoster?
Oh, thank you for asking that question. A paternoster is usually a short beaded piece, sometimes with a tassel, sometimes with a cross. And it was from the Latin, our Father who art in heaven. And so that's why it was called a paternoster. And with each bead in a paternoster, similar to a rosary, you say a prayer.
How
Now
large,
go ahead.
how large were they?
They were very short.
Like,
Now, you will sometimes see a bracelet called the decade. It's the same thing. It's 10 beads. But the Catholics weren't the only ones who had them. There are Muslim prayer beads that are very similar to the same. And with each bead, they pray. One of the little research rabbit holes that I went down as I was doing this project and learning about these things was there are a lot of different spiritual and religious beliefs that weave praying into their garments, if you will. So not only do they make beads that they pray, the Jewish prayer shawls have tassels. And when they make the prayer shawls and they tie those tassels, they weave a prayer into those tassels, which I think is just fascinating stuff. My mom's women's group used to have they would make quilts, and as they would tie the strings to hold the quilt together, they would pray for whoever they were making the quilts for. The whole thing is just, I think it's really interesting how people approach their religious and spiritual beliefs. Did that answer your question?
yes. Thank
Oh,
you.
good. I'm glad.
Virginia asks, is it possible to put a reliquary bag into a larger reliquary bag?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. There were some extant pieces that I saw where a person would have a relic from more than one saint. And so I would put one saint's relics in this bag, and I would put another saint's relics in this bag, and then I would put all of these into another bag. And then I would carry, because in the time frame when these were very, very popular and when reliquaries were being made, they were very, very important spiritual focus items for the people who owned them and carried them. Did that answer your question, Virginia?
She gave a thumbs up.
Brilliant. That's perfect. So if you're coming back to finish the class next week, when is the next one? I don't remember off the top of my head.
The next class is on
It's on Valentine's Day.
Oh, how fun. So if you're with your Valentine, that's fine. I understand. You don't need to attend the class. I think it's in the afternoon.
I have the next reliquary bag class as Saturday, February 20th from 1 to 3 p.m.
Oh, good. Oh, I
Maybe
think it's garb class. Shiny, did you have a question, honey?
Oh, no, I said maybe I was thinking of a different class that's next Sunday.
I do have a garb class on Sunday. Yes, my garb class is on Sunday. So what I'd like to do for the next class is I'm going to show you how to finish some of the bags, and we can talk about the stitching that would go on. But then I really want to see the work that you've done. I really want it to be a show and tell. I know I'm short of my time, but I can't think of anything else I need to tell you.
If anybody has any questions, then at this point, we'll just open up to an open chat.